Okay, I'm going to let the secret out of the bag. Is that okay? How do you like secrets? How do you can keep a secret? Okay. All right. Dwayne is actually in his educational process to receive his credentials. So when you see him, tell him how proud you are of him, and he'll be like, well, why? Okay, and all right, so just that's just our secret. Okay, secret's out. All right. Hey, hey, we just want to say thanks for being here today. I want to say especially thank you for your generosity and your giving. Our church is just really blessed with people that are generous. And we have so many things to be thankful for. And we've got this building project out here that we've raised a lot of cash towards that. We've got the roof nearly done. But beyond all the building stuff that we've got going on, we give to missions regularly. We have just continued to give and help towards things like Convoy of Hope and Africa's Hope. And these are organizations that take very little off the top administrative costs. And we are literally helping Africa right now. In fact, we just got a report in Ethiopia that they have as a result of some of the giving that we have participated with in this project. This last year, they have planted 800 churches in Ethiopia. And they plan on planting another 1,000 over the next year. That's their goal. And that's like a huge deal. And they couldn't have done it without us because we were giving towards the purpose of curriculum and Bible studies to train pastors. And really, that's what our giving is all about. And so not only does it help us here locally, but it helps us all around the world to communicate the good news of Jesus. And I just want to say thanks for being a part of that. And so a couple of ways that you can be generous is you can either text the amount that you want to give, just write the word give with a $sign, put the amount that you want to give, and you can send it to this number, or you can just QR code that if you like to do that, and that'll send you right to our link. All right, you can do the website thing at relevantchurch.org, and what that does is that'll take you right into our giving page on our PayPal, if you'd prefer to use PayPal. Or we're going to invite the ushers, and we got some amazing people that are going to come down right now, and we've got a bucket for you if you'd rather just throw some money in the bucket, okay? However you want to be generous today, however you want to express that, we've got a couple different ways to do that. But here's what I want to do is I want to pray, and then we're going to take 60 seconds to give today. And I'm just going to pray that God just blesses what is given, and most importantly, blesses the giver who gives it. Is that okay? You're not sure. Okay. All right. Let's pray. Jesus, we're thankful that we can have some fun in church, and we're thankful that you've been so generous to us. God, as we think about all the things that we've been able to accomplish as a smaller church right here in Jacksonville, we've been able to impact the world in big ways. And God, all for the kingdom. And Lord, today we don't give to the church. We certainly don't give to Pastor Brian or to the elders or the deacons or the finance team. Lord, today our posture is to give to you, to just say thank you for what you have done for us. And so, God, I just want to pray a blessing, no matter how people give today, that as they give to you, that you would bless not only what is given and multiply that in your kingdom. You always find a way to do that. But Lord, that you would also bless the giver who gives it in Jesus' amazing name. If you agree with that prayer, I want you to say a great big amen. All right, Lord bless you as you give. We're going to give you 60 seconds, and then we're going to get right into Bible therapy, okay? Go for it. Well, good morning, everybody. And we want to say good morning to everybody who's joining us online today and has joined us here just a couple of minutes ago, and say thanks for doing that. We still have a couple of churches who follow us every Sunday because they're without a pastor. But the good news is that we're getting really, really close to them being able to have their own leadership. And we're just praying that'll be a blessing to them. And so we got some good things happening with that. And so thank you, crowds, for joining us with that. Well, today, what I want you to do, have you brought a Bible with you? Okay, if you don't have a Bible, I want you to open up your phone and you can download a free Bible. Just type that into your app store and you can download a Bible. And I want you to turn to the book of Mark chapter 8. That's where we're going to be today as we study God's Word. And today we're actually going to be in part 5 of an 8-part series that we just simply entitled this right here, The Challenge to Follow. The Challenge to Follow. Would you just say that with me? Come on. The Challenge to Follow. And what we've been doing for the last few weeks is talking about this topic. And if you're joining us for the first time today, whether you be online or in the house, and if you've missed the first 4 messages, I want to encourage you to go to relevantchurch.org, and you can just click on the Watch Bible Therapy icon there, and that'll kick you right into our YouTube page, and you can see all of the archives of previous messages. And I just want to encourage you to do that. But here's what we've been talking about the last few weeks is the benefits, really the benefits of following Jesus. Because here's the thing, is that if you were raised in a religious home or with a religious mindset within your home, it's highly likely that you were very similar to me in that you picked up this idea somewhere along the way that Christianity is a lot like the game Simon Says, only it's because it's about Jesus, it's really a game of Jesus Says. And you might have picked up along the way that it's a game, that it's a lifelong game of just doing whatever Jesus says, or maybe you might even say that it's a game of don't do that, right? Either you got to do this or you don't do that, okay? And so here's what we've been talking about is this idea that if you don't do what you're supposed to do and you end up doing things that you're not supposed to do, then the church kind of sent the message years ago that if you can't keep up, you're out. And as a result of that, many of us, and perhaps you are watching here today, or maybe you've returned to church recently, you just kind of threw up your hands and just said, I just can't do it anymore. I can't keep the rules. I can't measure up. I can't meet people's expectations. And so I'm done. I'm just done with this whole church thing. And so if that's you, here's what I want to communicate. And what we've been learning is that the reason why that happened to you, okay, is because of this right here. That the gravitational pull of all religion, everybody say all religion, okay, of all religion is to really make rule following more important than relationships. And so there's lots of reasons why this happens, but this is the gravitational pull toward every single religion, and Christianity is no different, okay? Churches are no different in this regard, all right? And honestly, we at this church, we constantly fight this same gravitational pull to just follow the rules. As long as I'm doing what Jesus says, as long as I don't do that, okay, then I'm okay. But the thing of it is that what we've been learning is the reason why that happens historically in all religions, and why it particularly happens in Christianity, is because rule following is a lot easier to do than to maintain relationship with other people. And what I mean by that is that whenever you break a rule, and whenever I break a rule, whenever we break rules, we always know that we can go to God and we can ask God to forgive us, and we know that He will. Hello? Okay? So it's easier for us to just check off some boxes of rights and wrongs and do's and don'ts and kind of follow this little script of, well, I better always do what Jesus says and I better don't ever do that, okay, than to make things right with people, because people are difficult to get along with. How many of you are sitting next to those people right now? Don't raise your hands, okay? Okay. Isn't that true though? I mean, it's just easier to just check off a few boxes and, okay, I'm doing this and I'm not doing that. And I'm making sure that I always, instead of trying to address a relationship issue, because it's easier to follow some of God's rules than it is to dive into the mess of relationship with people who have broken lives. And we all have broken lives, don't we? So what happens is that we have a tendency to create this religious system, if you will, where we can make things right with God based upon what we do or what we don't do. So it's within that context, if you will, that Jesus comes on scene a couple thousand years ago. And what he does is he just invites people to just follow him. And he just says, hey, would you just come and just follow me? And which really, as we've been learning, is this emphasis that Jesus is making about this relationship with him, that we pursue a relationship with him over the rules. That it's not that we just follow the rules just because they're written down, but it's this idea that we choose to follow some rules and we choose to do certain things and avoid certain things in our lives because of our love for Jesus, just like you would with your kids, just like you would with your spouse, just like you would with the people that you love in your life. There's certain things that you do, there's certain things that you don't do because of your love for them. And that's really what Jesus is asking for us. And so when we talk about the simplicity of following Jesus, it almost sounds too good to be true. Because if you have ever signed a contract before, if you have ever gone down to the bank and borrowed a little money or signed a contract, a business contract, there's usually a list of all the good things that you get, but somewhere in that contract is what we refer to as the fine print. And it tells you all the things that are expected of you to maintain that contract. So throughout this series, the last 4 weeks, what we've really done is we've identified a lot of advantages of following Jesus. And yet with every decision that we make, with every crossroads of decision that we come to and we decide we're going to do this or we're going to do that, something's going to pay. Okay, here's what I want you to understand, is that no matter what decision you make, there is always a price to pay. Always. And that includes choosing to follow Jesus. So this morning, what I want to do is I really kind of want to just talk about this idea and begin to navigate the difference between being a Jesus follower and being a Jesus consumer. I want to talk about the difference between following Jesus and just being in it for your own good. Okay, because if you choose to become a Jesus follower the way that Jesus intended and not just be a consumer, okay, not just get everything, but really choose to follow Jesus, I just think it's important that all of us know what the fine print is. Hello? Okay, so in Mark's gospel, Jesus kind of dives into this a little bit and he begins to explain the cost of what it costs us to become a Jesus follower. Okay, so let's talk about this. We're going to start in Mark chapter 8, and I'm going to start in verse 27. We're going to read a couple of verses, and we're going to talk about this as we go along. Okay, here's what happened. Jesus and his disciples, they had left Galilee, and they went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. And as they were walking along, he asked them this question: who do people say that I am? Now, this is such an interesting question, and I wouldn't necessarily advise you to ask other people this question. Because you may not like what they have to say. Just a thought. But for whatever reason, Jesus knows there's this discussion, kind of this buzz going around of who he is. And so Jesus asked this question: who do people say that I am? Well, they replied, well, some say that you're John the Baptist. Others say that you're Elijah. And others say that you're one of the other prophets. Now, let's just stop right here. Let's identify these here for a minute, because by the time that we're reading this story, and by the time Jesus is asking this question of his disciples, John the Baptist had actually been martyred for his faith, and was beheaded, okay, by Caesar because he had approached Caesar for living and having this sexual relationship with all these people and these horrible sexual relationships. And so John the Baptist actually approaches him, which, as a Roman emperor, I'm not so sure, whatever, John decided to do that. And as a result of that, John gets his head cut off. So in this moment, some people believe that because John was a forerunner to Jesus, that Jesus was actually John the Baptist reincarnated that had come back as the Messiah. Okay, so some people thought that. But other people said, well, no, he's not John the Baptist. He's actually Elijah. And if you know your Old Testament story, you know that Elijah actually was a guy. He was an Old Testament prophet who had never actually died. But in fact, a chariot from heaven came down and captured him in front of his protege Elisha, and he carried and this chariot from heaven carried him off to an unknown location, and he never physically died. And so some people were thinking, well, it's either John the Baptist or it's Elijah who has actually returned. Okay, or maybe it might have been one of the other prophets. Okay, so Jesus goes on and he asks them, he says, well, what I'm really after here, fellas, is I want to know, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And Peter pipes up right away and he says, well, Jesus, you're the Messiah. Now, let me just stop right here for just a minute, because this word Messiah here is actually a Hebrew word. It comes from the Hebrew language, and it's translated into Greek as the word Christ. Okay, so Messiah and Christ is the same word in two different languages. Okay, so some of you, whenever you say the name Jesus Christ, you actually thought that Christ was Jesus' last name. Because that makes sense to us, doesn't it? And so we say, well, Jesus Christ, that's his last name. Okay, but that's actually not true, because Christ and Messiah, though they're from two different languages, they mean the same thing. And what it means is the anointed one. Okay, the anointed one. So what Peter is saying is he's saying, well, Jesus, I know who you are. Okay, you're the one that we've been waiting for. You are Jesus, the Messiah. You are Jesus, the anointed one. You are Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one of God. And what's interesting is that when we read the very next verse, what I find so interesting is how Jesus responds to this answer. Because what he says is, he says, well, you're not to tell anybody about this. Which it sounds so strange to us, because like if you're a Jesus follower, that's like our job, is to tell people about Jesus, Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the anointed one. We're to tell people about that. But in this moment, Jesus says, no, don't do that. And then Jesus gets into kind of the fine print that we're going to talk about today, the differences between being a Jesus follower and being a Jesus consumer. Because here's what he goes on to say. He says, then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must, what? Suffer many terrible things, and that he will be, what's the word? Rejected by the elders. And he's talking about the elders of the Judaic religion, the leading priest, the teachers of the religious law. That he would be, what's the word? But 3 days later, that he would rise from the dead. And as he talked openly with his disciples, check this out. Peter takes him aside and begins to reprimand Jesus for saying such things. Now, I want you to get the picture here. This is just so interesting to me. Jesus is telling his followers, hey, these are the things that are going to happen. If you're going to be a Jesus follower, this is probably going to happen to you too. And here's what I'm going to go through. But as I go through this, Jesus is basically emphasizing, I trust and I hope that you disciples, that you followers of mine will continue to follow me. And in the middle of all of this, that Jesus is kind of pouring out his heart, Peter drags Jesus away, and he says, come on now, Jesus. I mean, what's up with all this negativity here? Why are you being so negative about all this stuff? I mean, things are looking good. I mean, look at the crowd that we've got here, Jesus. This is a big deal. Look at all these people. In fact, I would imagine that Peter's probably telling Jesus, hey, look, Jesus, you know, think about it. You've become a little bit popular. In fact, you've kind of become quite famous here in the region. In fact, Jesus, not just you, but I've become a little famous. I've become a little more popular. And even Matthew over here, you know, remember that guy, the tax collector? He's actually become a little bit famous and popular too. So come on, let's get back over here to the crowd and let's be positive and let's quit talking about this death and dying thing and all the bad things that are going on. Let's just stop with all the negativity. Okay? That is precisely what Peter is doing with Jesus in this moment. Okay? So Jesus, he turns around and he looked at his disciples and then he reprimands who? Peter. The guy that just reprimanded him, Jesus turns around and says, you're not going to do that to me. Let me tell you the bigger picture here, Peter. He says, and then Jesus goes on to say as he's reprimanding Peter, he says, get away from me, Satan, he said, for you are seeing things merely from a, come on, human point of view, not from God's. Now, what is happening here is Jesus is not calling Peter Satan, but he is addressing Satan, who is influencing Peter to say these things. Okay? So what's happening here in this moment is that Satan had come alongside of Peter and was trying to derail the message that Jesus had for his disciples and the whole crowd that he's talking to, which honestly is kind of like a great big clue for all of us, that if we're not careful, if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, if we're not careful as a church, that Satan can actually use any one of us to derail people from the true message of Jesus. Okay? It is completely possible. I mean, if he's doing it to Peter, who was an actual apostle of Jesus, one of the chosen 12, he can probably do that to us. Hello. So that's a cue, a little cue and a clue for us to hone in on here, okay? But I want to ask you this question here, because did you catch the reason why Jesus reprimands Peter? That's probably more important here to our discussion. Did you catch the reason why? Here's what I want you to gather with me, okay? That all of us have a tendency to see things from what? Our human point of view instead of God's. And isn't that true when you're navigating some difficulties in your life? Isn't that true when things aren't going your way? That you have a tendency to just simply view those things from your human point of view instead of God's. That maybe God has a bigger plan. That maybe God has something that he's planning that is way beyond your scope of vision in this moment. And I think that's really what Jesus is trying to emphasize. And what I'm trying to teach us here today is that if we're not careful, we can be just like Peter. That we can resolve ourselves to being content with seeing things simply from a human point of view, simply because we are human. But Jesus, what he does in the middle of all this is he addresses that mindset for us. And he might be saying, you know, this is my words, but okay, so I'm kind of putting words in Jesus' mouth here, but I'm just kind of thinking that he might be telling Peter, hey, look, Peter, okay, or look, Brian, okay, or look, insert your name into this. Isn't it true that you've enjoyed following me? I mean, because we enjoy following Jesus. I mean, as a result of following Jesus, Jesus would say to us, look, you know, I've blessed you. I've given you some things. Life has been pretty good for you. But right now, Peter, insert your own name here, you are acting more like a consumer than a follower. Because consumers hang out for what they can get out of it. But Jesus would communicate to us that he wants us to be his follower, which means that when Jesus asks us to do something that is not what I want, that is not within my scope of how I envision life to happen, it's not what I prefer, that when Jesus asks, what Jesus is really asking is, will you still be part of the team? Will you still do what I ask you to do? See, that's the difference between a consumer and a follower, is that consumers are in it for themselves, all the good things. But a follower says, well, Jesus, despite the good things, in spite of all the good things that could happen, I know there's going to be some bad things too. And I'm choosing to follow you and do what you ask, even when it's not what I want to do. So then Jesus goes on, then calling the crowd to join his disciples, Jesus says to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my, what's the word? Follower, you must turn from your what? Oh, how many of you just did not want to hear that right now? Okay, we got to turn from our selfish ways and we got to take up our and follow. Got to follow him. Now, we know that there are huge benefits to following Jesus. And some of you have been enjoying a lot of those benefits. Your marriage got better when you started following Jesus. Your life began to turn around when you started following. You actually have, your character has actually improved. And you've become a happier person. You're filled with joy and peace. And now you know that you could set your eyes towards heaven when you die, and you know that you're going to be with Jesus forever. Those are great benefits, but listen, when that's all you focus on, that's what consumers do. Okay? Jesus says, if you want to be a follower, the first step is to what? Turn from our what? Selfish ways. Now, the reality of it is that we do this all the time. Okay? It's just not in God's perspective. Okay? We're just not doing it with Jesus all the time. But we do this all the time. Okay? Now, if you're a parent, you absolutely do this all the time. Okay? For example, you'd rather go out on a Tuesday night, but you know that the kids have school the next day. So you choose to stay home, put the kids to bed early, and you'll suffer, right? I mean, you're denying yourself. Okay, this happens when you go out to dinner. And you go out to dinner and you sit at a restaurant and you're done eating the entree and the main course, and the waitress comes along and the server they say, hey, did you save any room for what? Oh, yeah. And we're like, oh boy. Yeah. And we think to ourselves, I want some, my little precious. Yes, I want some. And then something inside you says, no, I already ate too much. I better not. I'm going to deny myself the pleasure of some dessert because I know that it's healthier for me. Hello? Okay, we do this all the time. Okay? And we tell ourselves no all the time. I want that, but I'm going to wait. I would love to, but I better not. I'm choosing no. Here's what Jesus is saying to you and I this morning. Is that there's going to be a time, there's going to be moments, there's going to be a crossing road or a point of tension in our lives where Jesus is going to ask us to do something for him that is different than what you want to do. And in that moment, you're at a crossroads and you have to decide whether you're going to be a consumer or whether you're going to be a follower. And if your decision is to follow Jesus, then what that means is that you're going to have to tell yourself no towards the things that you want in order to be a true follower of Jesus. So that's step one, is we got to deny ourselves. We got to turn from our selfish ways. But here's the second thing that Jesus tells us to do, is he says we got to take up what? Take up our, come on, say it with me, our what? Our cross. Now this, I want to just hit on this here for just a minute. I just want to talk about this because when we think of crosses, in fact, let me just ask, how many of you are wearing a cross right now? Let me just see your hands. Come on, raise your hands. Okay, you got a cross on. It's Sunday. Got to pull my cross out. Got to wear it around my necklace here. Maybe you got some little cool earrings. Okay, I know people who have tattoos of crosses. Okay, in fact, we see crosses in tattoos, earrings, necklaces. We see crosses, nice little sanded crosses on top of our church buildings. Okay. In fact, if you're driving by, not in Jacksonville because they don't allow backlit signs, but other towns, you might see a cross that's kind of backlit. Okay, kind of a cool little shiny, little sparkly, loaded with diamonds and all kinds of cool. We see crosses in stained glass, and there are always these pretty little crosses, right? Hello? Okay, I mean, that's how we identify crosses. And what's interesting is that we actually see society. We see famous people and ball players, and we see actors and all kinds of people and rock stars, and they wear these crosses as a symbol, but yet they turn around and they act and talk just like the devil. And you wonder, what is the deal with that? Well, here's the reason why. Is because we identify crosses in our culture as nothing more than just simply a symbol. Okay, but listen to me. When Jesus says this to the crowd that he's talking to, they had a completely different mindset of what a cross was really like. Because in Jesus' day, the idea of a cross, it actually scared people to death, literally, because the Romans had actually invented the cross and had perfected the execution of people and all kinds of lawbreakers on the cross. And so when Jesus says this to this crowd, immediately their mind goes to whenever they walked by one of these crosses and they saw a criminal hanging on this cross. And in those days, you could actually smell the work of a cross. You could see the work of a cross. You saw the graphic details of what happened on a cross. And so what Rome would do in Jesus' day is they would literally use crosses as a means to terrify people right into submission. And Jesus says, listen, if you're going to follow me, you are going to have to pick up your and follow me. You're going to need to pick up your own cross, which just means something different to those people when Jesus was talking than it does to us. So then Jesus, he goes on and he says something that should make us all ponder. And he says this. He says, you know, if you try to hang on to your life, you're actually going to lose it. And this is such an interesting thing. In other words, what Jesus is saying is that whoever desires to hang on to their life, to sustain their life, which is all of us. This is why many of you prefer to eat salads. This is why we stay away from the carbs. It's why we stay away from the sugars. It's why we go to the gym. It's why we get plastic surgery, help us look younger. This is why we exercise, to help us live longer, because we all want to hang on to our life. We want to avoid death. We want to avoid losing our life. And Jesus says, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you do, no matter what you prevent yourself from eating or how little you work out, no matter what it is that you do, eventually all of us will what? We're going to lose our life. To which all of us say, well, yeah, we know that. But here's what Jesus says. If you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, which is another word for gospel. That's what gospel means, is good news. Jesus says, then you'll actually save it. Now, what Jesus is doing here is he's really explaining that even though all of us, that we will eventually lose our life, there's nothing we can do to preserve it, that if we choose to follow Jesus, then what happens is, yeah, we may lose this life, but in exchange, we're going to gain another kind of life. Jesus is saying that whoever loses anything that you value right now, anything that you identify as your life, something valuable that you think that you just can't live without, a relationship that's probably going to end up gone anyways, or your health that is just constantly in the decline. Okay, no matter what it is, Jesus says that whatever you give up for the sake of the gospel, for following Jesus, you'll actually be saving your life, which initially kind of seems like a loss, doesn't it? But we're going to lose those things anyways. So Jesus is giving us an opportunity, really, to lose it for a purpose. For example, you might have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you need to lose. I mean, you know it. And you just, something inside of you is saying something. Jesus is saying, hey, if you choose to lose that boyfriend or girlfriend for my sake, I'm going to give you another life to live. I'm going to give you something more valuable than that. Maybe it's your job or your money or your stuff or your friends who have a bad influence on you, okay? Whatever it is, you can choose to lose those things because you can't hold on to them forever. You can choose to lose those things on purpose, which just leads me to just ask a simple question for all of us. If you're going to lose it, then what do you have to lose anyways? What do you have to lose? I mean, if you're going to lose it, why not lose it for a greater purpose? That's what Jesus is asking. And then Jesus, he asks a really important question that all of us need to reflect on. And here's what he says. He says, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Now, that's a good question to ponder. Now, I want you to imagine with me for a minute that you had everything that you ever wanted and more. You had so much that you wouldn't even know it. You couldn't even spend it all or do anything with it. I mean, you just own it all. Let's just imagine for a minute that you were the king or the queen of your own little kingdom, okay, of your own little world, and everybody obeyed your every desire. They waited on you. They ensured that you just had all your little comforts that you liked. They knew exactly, and you didn't even have to ask. They just come and they knew your thoughts, and they just come and get you whatever you needed, okay? I mean, wouldn't it be cool if you could just eat whatever you want, not get fat? That's the kind of world we're talking about. Okay, would it be cool if you could just ensure that all your desires were fulfilled? That you could just do whatever you wanted without any kind of consequences? That what you say is actually the law? That you could live, that you could say, you could talk, you could do whatever you wanted, and the whole world could just come to your beck and call. Okay, let's just imagine that were actually possible. In other words, you might be just like right up underneath God at that point. Okay, let's just imagine that for a minute. Jesus is asking you this question. What do you benefit if you gain all of that? If you could have every single bit of that, pleasure, precious gems, property, leisure, fame, power, control. Is there any benefit to gaining all of that, which you're going to lose because we're all going to eventually die? Is there any benefit to that if you end up losing your soul? Is there any benefit to gaining something that you can't take with you when you die if you end up losing your soul as well? That's what Jesus is asking. Now, for clarity, Jesus, he doesn't actually identify what it means to lose our soul. Okay, it could mean that you just simply cease to exist. It could mean that you actually go to hell instead of heaven. Okay, but whatever it is that Jesus meant, it's not good. Okay, so if you knew that hanging on to the most amazing life in this world would cause you to lose your soul, here's the question: would you still hang on to that stuff? Would you still hang on to those things? And then Jesus, he asks another important question. And he says, is there anything worth more than your soul? That's the question. In other words, when you arrive at the end of this amazing life that you've created for yourself, where the world just comes to your beck and call, you're the king and queen of your little world, you got servants, wealth, prestige, leisure, possessions, whatever you want, okay? When you reach the end of this life, how much of that would you trade in order that your soul could live forever? What would you trade to ensure that you didn't lose your soul? To which all of us would say, well, I would trade everything. And so Jesus, what he does with these two questions is he identifies something for us, and he really provides us with the obvious answer. Okay? And here's what he says. He says, what do you benefit to gain the whole world but lose your soul? And the answer is what? Nothing. And then he says, but what would you give in exchange to save your soul? All of us would say, we would give it all, because we know that our soul would live forever. To which Jesus, the master communicator in this moment, would say to those of you who are afraid to become a follower, to move away from consumership and into true followership. Those of you that are trying to hang on to your life and all this little stuff that you possess. Those of you that are holding Jesus kind of at arm's length. Jesus, I like the benefits, but I'm not sure. Jesus would say to you, look what you discovered about yourself. What we've all discovered is that your soul has greater worth than anything else. Possessions is greater than your friends, free time, your prestige, everything. And there are scenarios in our life in which we would trade everything to save our soul. Which, if you think about it, that is a life-changing and life-defining moment for all of us. So, in this moment that Jesus is teaching this, the audience that is listening to him, the ones who are kind of afraid to follow Jesus, they're kind of going, well, man, maybe I need to rethink my position a little bit here, Jesus. And I imagine that there were some people that kind of talked back to Jesus and said, so Jesus, you're telling us that if we have to deny ourselves and give up what's important to us to be your follower, that when we do that whatever we give up to following you, that we are going to lose things that we're going to lose anyways, that you're telling us that we have an opportunity to give it up in such a way that impacts the future of our soul? To which I think Jesus would say, well, you're absolutely right. That's correct. That is exactly what I'm saying. And then Jesus, he ends his discourse with this phrase. And here's what he says. If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns to the glory of his Father with the holy angels. In other words, what Jesus is saying is that as we go forward in our relationship with each other, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, Aren't you one of those Jesus followers? And if you say, well, things are getting kind of tough right now, and I'm kind of ashamed of Jesus, so no, I'm not actually one of those Jesus followers. What Jesus is saying is that in that moment, that Jesus will be ashamed of you. Which honestly, it just sounds so harsh. That the God who died for us, the Jesus who loves us, the Messiah, the Christ who came for us, the anointed one who came for us, would actually be ashamed of us in that moment. And yet, one of the guys who was right in the middle of this conversation and listening to everything that Jesus has said was a guy by the name of Peter, who just weeks and perhaps months later, he said, Jesus, I'll never deny you. I'll never deny who you are. And yet, as Jesus was literally dying on a cross, he denied Jesus how many times? Not once, not twice, but how many? 3 times. And the question is, how did Jesus respond in that moment? Did Jesus kick him out of the group? Well, Peter, you didn't follow the Jesus Says game. All you're doing is the don't do that's game. You're out. Did Jesus respond like that? No. In fact, Jesus forgave Peter in that moment. And he actually put him in charge of the entire enterprise. And Peter went on to go plant churches all over the Mediterranean rim and throughout and become a great leader. And years later, Peter actually died a martyr's death because of what he saw, a risen Savior. So, as we wrap this up today, the question is, what does all this mean for you and for me? As we're talking about the difference between a consumer and a follower, here's a phrase that you just need to walk away with and completely understand what the fine print means. Okay, and it's this. Is that salvation is free, but being a follower is going to cost you something. You can be saved. That is a free gift. We're all saved from our sin by simply placing our faith in Jesus Christ. That is a gift that is free to anybody who chooses to take it. Why? Because Jesus, he already paid that price for you. He paid the price for anybody, regardless if you choose to accept that gift or not. It's kind of like when you come here on Sunday mornings and we talk about the idea of free coffee and donuts. Okay? We provide that for you. That is already paid, whether you choose to go get some or not. That's precisely what salvation is. The price has been paid for you to receive that, whether you choose to go get it or not. But listen, becoming a follower of Jesus will eventually cost you something that you don't want to give up. And here's how that looks. At some point in your faith journey, you will begin to feel this conviction inside of you. You'll begin to feel perhaps a conflict, if you will. And your soul is just kind of wrestling with this difficult decision. And here's what that looks like, is that in that moment, you will know what it is because it's going to feel like either an ethical or a moral necessity for you. It will address one of those two things. And Jesus is going to say it has to do with your ethics or your morals of whether or not you're just simply a consumer or a true follower. It will be as if your conscience inside of you is just kind of coming alive. And you begin to think to yourself, boy, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I really shouldn't be doing that anymore. Maybe I need to stay, or maybe I need to leave. Maybe I need to go. Maybe I need to quit doing that. Okay, here's the thing that I want you to understand. You will absolutely know what it is. And this is the moment where you're going to realize, this is going to cost me something to be a follower of Jesus. I'm going to have to give something up that is moral and ethical to me. And I just want to just say to you that it could include something that you selfishly desire, or it could be a cross that you have to bear. Okay, so on an everyday today look, here's what that may look like. It may be how you talk. Maybe an anger issue. Maybe what you participate in or what you're watching. And maybe what you're listening to, or perhaps what you consume and put into your body. It might be something to do with your sexual activity that you have to give up. The friends that you are keeping, or the ways that you find entertainment. Whether you go to church on Sunday mornings or choose to sleep in. Maybe whether you choose to read your Bible or watch the Dodgers on TV. Some of you don't care about Dodgers, so we'll say Red Sox. Fortunately for you, you don't have to wrestle with that. You can just read your Bible from now on. Okay, until next season. Okay? You with me? You tracking with me? Okay, listen, seriously. Whatever it is that you're feeling this tension, you will feel an ethical or a moral necessity to make a change. And at that moment, you're going to need to either deny your own personal desires and pick up your cross and follow Jesus, or just do your own thing. And the good news is that when that moment comes, I think you're going to know. I think you're going to know when it is. There will be absolutely nothing in your mind that questions. You're going to think, oh, this is that thing that Pastor Brian was talking about a couple weeks ago. This is that time when I can't say yes to both me and to Jesus. I'm going to have to say no to me or no to Jesus. And in that moment, listen, in that moment, because you're super smart and because I know that you love Jesus, I believe that you will do the right thing. Listen, I don't believe it's a coincidence that you're here today. I don't believe it's a coincidence that you're watching online today in this moment. I don't believe any of that's coincidental, because I believe that God has offered all of us salvation free of charge. All we have to do is go get it. But listen, if you want to move from being a consumer to a follower, you just need to know that it's eventually going to cost you something. And our natural tendency is to view this from our human perspective, because we're all human, not God's. But we have a choice, don't we? And that's why we say it's really the challenge to follow Jesus. So here's what I want to do today is I want to pray for you, because I think that some of you today, as we've been talking about this, I think that some of you have been going, yeah, there's that thing, there's a couple things. And listen, this isn't a game of don't do that. That's not what this is about. It's not a game of Jesus says, therefore I better just, okay. What this is Jesus in his relationship with you is inviting you to follow and saying, look, if you love me, here's what brings me satisfaction. If you love me, here's what hurts me and offends me. If you love me, let's have a relationship. You work on those things and we'll love each other together. So I want to pray for you, because I think some of you are there right now. Would you just stand to your feet? And I just want to just pray that God will give you the strength to not view this as a bunch of rules and do's and don'ts, but to view this as a means to following. Dear Jesus, today we've welcomed you here all day, and we believe that you're here. Lord, we believe for the last 45 minutes or so that you have been speaking to us through the power of your word, and that you have just been speaking directly to each one of us. And so, Lord, today we have a choice to either remain a consumer or to become a follower. And Lord, some of us in this room, we've been kind of holding you at arm's length, and we've kind of been just kind of bouncing around and kind of just doing whatever we want to do. And we've enjoyed being a consumer. But Lord, what you're asking us today is to just take another step and really to become a follower. And Lord, that's going to cost us something. And Lord, I just pray that today, that as we deal with these things that you have given to each one of us in our heart, you've spoken to our hearts and our minds, that as we deal with these things today, that you will give us the strength to do what pleases you because of our love for you. Jesus, we're so thankful that you first loved us. And so, God, we just want to come into a relationship with you and become true followers of Jesus. So I pray this blessing over everybody here today in your amazing name. Amen. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today is we always end with a question, okay? And the challenge is that we always like to just turn to our friends, okay, and just hang out 2 or 3 people, and then some people are left alone. I want to just encourage you today that to just nuzzle up next to somebody, you don't even know them, okay? And if you're alone today, don't be nervous, okay? We're all family here, okay? We're all weird, okay? It's okay. Okay, we'll all love you. Okay, but I want you to just turn to a neighbor, and I want you to invite 2 or 3 people. Nobody should be left alone. I want you to just target this question here today. Okay, what part of your life are you hanging on to, quote unquote, that Jesus is asking you to give up? Okay, I think that everybody can answer that question today. All right. And so I want you to just turn to a neighbor, make sure that nobody's left alone. Just invite somebody to be part of your group, 2 or 3 people. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to answer this question, and I want you to redirect your attention up here. Okay, ready? Go for it. Okay. How many needed more time today? Always need more time, right? Hey, I want you to just direct your attention up here real quickly before you go, because I've got a couple of important things we need to address and just give you information on. The first thing is that we have started collecting the Samaritan's Purse and the shoe boxes, okay? If you went down to the SIPs today, which is down on this end of the building, go out the back and to your left, you go all the way to the end of the hallway there, and you can see Grandma Ruth and get a shoe box, and this will just help us give the poor a really good Christmas, and she can tell you all about that. Okay, so we're going to do this for a bunch of weeks, and we're just collecting those. I encourage you to go get a shoe box and participate with that. Okay, here's the second thing is that the fall has come, and we are relaunching lots of new stuff, and one of those is a prayer focus. Okay, and so my mom actually, and she's just a beautiful lady. She's in Texas right now. She'll be back on Tuesday. But starting October 15th, and for every first and third Wednesday at 10 to 11 a.m. right here at the church, we're just going to have a prayer focus, and she's going to lead that, okay? And if you'd like to pray or if you want prayer, okay, I want to encourage you to just come, and these people will just make it happen. They're wonderful people, okay? And so you can talk to her if you have any questions about that. Here's the other thing is that this Tuesday, everybody say this Tuesday, okay, we have both men's and women's fellowship lunch, okay? But here's the thing. I guess that we believe in segregation here or something. I'm not sure because the men are meeting at Mountain Mike's and the women are meeting at Angelo's. Okay. And so we want you to do this, participate. Okay. If you got a short lunch hour, come anytime between 12 and 1. And it's just a great opportunity for you to make some friends. Okay. And the women's group, this is brand new for the women. Okay. But the men know we've been doing this a long time. So it's this Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday of every month. Okay. So we want you to participate with that. Here's the other thing. Small groups. We're starting these Sunday, October the 19th. Okay. And so today is one of the last possible days that you can sign up for small groups. Now, here's the way this happens is we do them on the first and third Sunday of every month. So twice a month. Okay. And we meet in homes and it goes from 5 and we're promptly done at 7. And what happens is the first hour, we share a meal together as a small group. And these groups are no larger than 12. Okay. And we have a meal for the first hour. And then we come together and we just have a Bible study and we just talk about Bible. Okay. And so any question that you have about life, Bible, marriage, work, kids, anything at all, okay, we will talk about that and we will go right to the Bible and we will give you answers for that. Okay. This is just a wonderful format. And so if you want to participate with this, we encourage you to just sign up for that at the table before you leave today and head out the glass doors. Okay. And so today is one of the last days that you can sign up. So if you've been thinking about it, you've been vacillating, do it today. Okay. Lastly, everybody go, okay. Lastly, be very, very cautious when you exit the building. Okay. We talk about this every week. It is a natural inclination to walk out the door and expect there to be a landing. There is no landing out here. Okay. So as soon as you open the doors, please expect an immediate step down. If you need a ramp access, you can go all the way down to the end of the hallway through SIPs and we have ramp access there. But if you come out these main doors, please be careful. Hey, how have you noticed that the building's looking good? Yeah. I want to say a special thank you to our contractor, Dave DeBoe. Him and his crew has been working amazing. And we've got a lot more work to go. Okay. And there's some things that the work crews that we're going to do as a volunteer basis. Okay. And so if you haven't received a text on that, okay, there's a reason for that. Okay. But we are going to be launching that. We got some painting, we got some siding, we got some things that we're going to be doing. And if you'd like to participate with that, just come see me and I'll tell you how to get connected. Okay. So God bless you. Have a great week. Sign up for group.
Joining us for Bible Therapy today. We're so glad you're a part of our online community. Please like, subscribe, or leave a comment in whatever platform you're watching us from. This action helps us know you're there and helps us expand to other viewers. You can also connect with Pastor Brian and Relevant Church by sending email to reachus@relevantchurch.org or text the word follow to 541-262-0269. We're so glad you joined us today. We hope you will join us again next week. And we also invite you to watch more of Pastor Brian's Bible therapy sessions on YouTube and connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Relevant Church, Oregon.